Welcome back, you guys, to the Brown Paper Theology Podcast. I'm Will Wolf, and as ever, it is the mission of this podcast to inspire people to get into the foundational texts of our faith, to hear what God is still saying through them. Now, to do that today, we're diving into the story of Abraham this go-round. Now, we had to split up his story into two parts. And to be honest with you guys, I am still working on the pacing for these lessons, so it's a learning experience for me just as it is for you. So Abraham's story marks the beginning of the redemption arc of the grand narrative of the Bible. So it is vital with a capital V for us to absorb and understand, because in it we see God's ultimate plan to bless all the nations begin. But there's some bumps in the road on the way there. So I want you guys to listen closely and learn along with us, and I hope you enjoy it while you do. All right, here's the episode. So welcome back, guys. It's been quite a while, but it's okay. We're back in it. It's going to be wonderful. It's kind of a fitting spot that we stopped off last time. Over the past couple weeks, or over the last couple classes, we did Genesis 1 through 11, which, as we said a trillion times over, kind of forms the introduction. It's like the first main block of the entire biblical story. And it's usually the most, actually I shouldn't say usually, it is the most weird part of the Bible, I think. Because there's a lot of stuff that's super context specific, it's super context heavy, and so that's why we took a really long time to just sort of go through it slowly, to really soak up the story, to understand what the authors are saying, what they're thinking. So when we go into the rest of the story, we can understand where they're coming from, where their minds are, how they're processing things, and then a lot of the other stuff makes sense. So Genesis 1 through 11. Again, it was really basically like the same story two times over. If you guys remember, it was the story of chaos to order to garden, failure, and then failure again. And then it ends in that city. And then from that city, things get so bad that God sees things, that he sees the end of the road where it's going towards chaos. As he says, the end of all flesh has come up before me. He sees how this is all going to go. And he says, I have to do something about it. They're going to destroy themselves. I can't let that happen. I got to rescue my good world. And so what he does is he plunges the cosmos back into chaos so that then he can bring it back into order. And so this whole thing happens. It's Genesis 1 through, it's really like the creation through the flood. That's sort of the first main beat. So 1 through 6, really 1 through 9. And then after the flood, when Noah and his family get off the boat, they like replay this super quickly. And so when they get off the boat, Noah plants a garden. It's great. Then he gets drunk. It's like, oh no, that's his failure. And then his son does that really weird thing in the tent. It's like failure a second time. Then there's a splitting of the brothers. And then it leads to the Tower of Babel, which is what we talked about in the last class. And then, again, God looks at this unified humanity, and they're trying to build a tower to ascend back to the heavens, to unify heaven and earth again on their own terms. And he says, this can't happen. This is not good. And so he scatters them. Everybody clear where we are? We go too fast? Okay, cool. All right, so that's where we're kind of picking up at this moment. So we just went through 1 through 11, and it has those three problems that were set up. So the first problem is the problem of the serpent. The second problem is the problem of the giants. And then the third problem is the powers and the principalities. So that's Genesis 3. Genesis 6, and then Genesis 11. So as we go into the story, we're looking for someone. Who's this one going to be that's going to solve all those problems together? And we skip forward, as we often do, because we like to see the end first before we get there, is Jesus. Jesus is the one who solves all three of those problems. But we're not quite to Jesus yet. There's still like 2,000 years of history that we need to get through first. So we're going to pick up at Genesis chapter 12. My little eraser. And we're going to not be able to spend as much time on the stories of Abraham as we did with the rest of Genesis, just because there's a lot of ground to cover. And so we're going to go a little bit faster, but we're going to do our absolute best to get the main story beats going forward. All right, so before we do that, let's take a pause, because I need to take a pause, and let's open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll move forward. Father, thank you so much for today, God. Living is a gift. Existing is a gift, and it's a gift purely from you. And so, God, I pray that every moment that we live, whatever we do, God, that we would glorify you, that our actions, our thoughts, our words, whatever, God, they would point to you and glorify you. Jesus, I pray that you would be in this space. You promised that where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, there you are in the middle of them. And so, Jesus, we're gathering in your name right now. And we ask that you would be here. We know that you are here by your Spirit. And we pray that you would just envelop us and fill us up with your very love and with your life. I pray that you would open up our ears to hear you, our minds to comprehend you, and our hearts to receive you as we just go through this wonderful and at times confusing and at times downright weird story of Abraham. But this, God, this is where you began your redemption of your good world. And so help us to really just internalize it and to know it and to rejoice in your goodness. So I thank you for everybody that's here. Thank you that, thank you that we get to do this. So we thank you, we praise you, we just ask this in the authority of Jesus. Amen. Okay, so this is how the main structure, and I'm going to show you guys this is how the main structure of Abraham's story works. We have this little intro, and then we have basically the same story 4 times with slightly different variations, and then we have this little outro. Okay, so we have the end of 11, so 11b through 12. We have 12 through 14, 15 through 17, 18 through 19. And then these 3 stories, they're all one block, but each of the pieces is like patterned off of these 3 things. Does that make sense? Okay, so we have 20, 21, and 22-ish, and then 23 through 25. That's kind of like the closing frame of the story. So each of these is sort of its own narrative unit. And when I say it's the same story 4 times, I mean we're going to see the same sort of like actions, the same beats over and over and over again. And what they're going to be is they're going to be the new creation, failure, decreation pattern that we already talked about in Genesis 1 through 9. So that's why we took such a slow time to go through it. So that as we read these stories about Abraham, we're going to be like, hang on, this sounds like a splitting of the brothers part of the story. I wonder if there's a flood coming up next. So it's that kind of thing. It creates narrative anticipation in the readers going forward. Good? All right. Am I good to erase it? Okay. So I'm going to zoom in on each of these first. All right. So the very beginning of the story takes place right after goodness, this is not awesome. Right after the scattering at the Tower of Babel. All right, so we pick up at 11b, and we're just going to start with 11, verse 27. All right, now these are the generations of Terah. So Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Now Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai, she was barren. She had no child. Okay, that's going to come in handy later on. Now Terah took Abram his son and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans, that's Babylon, to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Now the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Okay, so they were starting this journey to go from Babylon to Canaan. Now the way that you have to do that, you can either take a straight shot, but you're going to go through the desert and probably die. So what you do is you go north, and then you go south to Canaan. So Haran is as that sort of northern part of their journey. That's where they settle, and then that's where Abram's father dies, and then that's kind of like where we're left off in the story. It's like this halfway. It begins with this sort of decreation at the Tower of Babel, the recreation of this family. They set forth on a journey, they fail, it ends in death, and then we have to kind of like start the beat over again. And so from this land, from Haran, which is this failure story, we get this. It says, now the Lord said to Abram, they're in Haran, okay? The Lord said to Abram, go, get up and go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. And hear this, guys, this is super vital. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you or treats you as cursed, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay, so this is God's driving force for picking out Abram. Remember, God wants all the nations of the earth. He wants all humanity. Okay, but remember, because of the failure at the tree, because of this fracturing, further chaos-ness, God promised that there was going to be this one seed of the woman, this one human who was going to crush the seed of the serpent once and for all. And because there's only going to be one human that's going to do that, that human has to come from a particular family line. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is where we get the story. God's picking the family of Abram. He's narrowing down his scope. He says, I'm going to work through this one family, this one dude, but his purpose has always been to bless all the families of the earth. Okay, that's the end goal, all the families, but for right now, pick one family. Good? Okay. All right. And amazingly, the whole point is whoever blesses Abram, God is going to bless them. Whoever treats Abram as cursed, he's going to curse them. But what we're going to see is that this mission that God gives Abram, which is to be a blessing to the nations, Abram just fumbles that at every turn. He deceives the nations. He ends up cursing other nations. And it's like, what's God going to do? This is this person that he's chosen. He's going to work through him. But this person just completely refuses to act the way that God wants him to act. But right now, there's this beautiful little beat of obedience. And it says, so Abram went as the Lord had told him. Okay, so we're going to start this first block, which is that 12 through 14 block. 12 through 14. We have God's calling. God doesn't live in the clouds, as you guys know, but I can't draw God. So go to Abram and Sarai. Okay, he's going to go to the land that I'm going to show you. But notice, what did he say? He says, I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to bless you. You're going to become a great nation. Do you guys remember what the people at the Tower of Babel, what they were so focused on, what they were trying to do, why they were building the tower? It's okay if you don't. To reach to what was it? What was the second part?
To make a name for them.
There you go. Yeah. So what they were doing at the Tower of Babel was trying to build a tower to make a name for themselves. And so the very thing that these people were trying to do for themselves, God says, I'm going to do that for you, Abram. And so it's God's blessing. He's the one that can make a name great. Not us. It's God. God bestows a great name, makes a great name, great descendants. Okay. Remember, and to be a mighty nation, you have to have a bunch of kids. Now, if you guys remember, Sarah, who's Abram's wife, she'd never been able to have a child. And so there's this narrative tension, like how is this childless couple, who we're going to see is super old, how are they going to have a child, and how is God going to fulfill that that part of the blessing? And that's a driving force throughout the entire narrative of Abram, spoilers. How is God going to fulfill that promise to a couple where it seems impossible? So we'll see. Let's see. All right, so Abram went as the Lord had told him, and you know what? Lot went with him. Now, Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. Now, when they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. Now, at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of Yahweh. and Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negev. Okay, so we have this beautiful story about Abram. He's going. God told him to go. He goes. So they're kind of like, I'm going to draw this. Okay, they're up here in Haran. Canaan's down here. Ooh, Canaan. I always spelled that wrong. I never know where the A's go. Yeah. Okay, so they go down to the land of Canaan. And when they get there, it's like this worship tour. It's like Abram goes to these beautiful trees. Do trees remind us of anything in the biblical story thus far? What's the place where there's beautiful trees? Okay, awesome, the Garden of Eden. So it's like Abram is this new human that God has called forth. He's taking him to this land, this beautiful land. He's having this awesome worship gathering where he's in communion with God. It's beautiful. It's like Eden all over again. And it's like Abram and Sarai are these new Adam and Eve figures going back into the land of Eden, back into the garden that God is giving them, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. Now, we should hear a little bit of tension again, because remember, God said, leave your father's household and go. And so what Abram does is he does go, but he doesn't entirely leave his family's household. He takes Lot with him. And so it's like this beautiful act of obedience with this little seed of like, it's not quite what God told you to do. And so we should have Lot in the back of our minds. And we should just think, I wonder if Lot is going to cause any problems later on in the story. Yeah, just like, there's someone there. It's just like, ooh, it's not quite obedient enough. But it's beautiful. We have this beautiful thing of Abram on this worship tour. It's great. Okay, so we should be thinking, because we're starting this sort of Eden, new human failure sort of sequence, that this part, we're like at the Adam and Eve sequence. We're like back in the garden. You guys see that? Is it making sense? Okay. So right now, we're going well. We're doing good. So Abram and Sarai are like Adam and Eve. But as we know from the garden narrative, Adam and Eve, they end up failing. So let's see what happens here. So there's this beautiful thing. They're starting up. It's great. And then in verse 10, now there was a famine in the land. Okay, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Now when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, now I know you're a woman who's beautiful to see. You're good in the eyes. And when the Egyptians see you, they'll say, oh, that's this guy's wife? Oh my gosh. Then they'll kill me and they'll let you live. So you know what? This is what you can do. How about say you're my sister so that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life will be spared for your sake. How does that sound? That sounds like a great idea. Now when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful, very good, saw good. Okay, and when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female servants. Wonder if those are going to come up anytime soon. Female donkeys and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and all his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, she's my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Okay, so we had Adam and Eve in the garden, but then there was this little bit of famine, and it's this thing of, can I trust God's provision for me? Remember, God said, go to the land I'm going to show you, I'm going to bless you. So they make it to the land, it's beautiful, but then as soon as something comes up, as soon as there's a famine, Abram takes it into his own hands and he says, you know what, no, we just got to go down to Egypt. I know God said that he was going to bless us down here, but we got to go to Egypt instead. Okay, so from Canaan, I did not plan for this much room. Okay. From Canaan, they go down to Egypt. And there, Abram acts like the snake. He says, hey, I'm going to deceive Pharaoh, so that's going to go well with me. And you, Sarah, I'm going to treat you like you're just disposable. You're just going to serve my ends because, man, if they see you, they're going to kill me. And I don't want to die. So, hey, I'm just going to put you in front of me. I'm going to allow you to sort of take the hit, put you at risk so that things can go well with me. It's almost as if Abram is treating his wife like an animal. It's almost as if Abram is living into that Genesis 3 consequence, which says this relational unity that you guys are going to have, it's going to be done. The man's going to rule over the woman. He's going to treat a woman like an animal. The woman's going to try to, her desire going to be for her husband to sort of trip him up. But right here we see Abram, he's acting exactly according to what God said. This is how the relationship is going to go. There's going to be this relational disunity, and it's not good. This is not a good thing. And so Abram is acting like the snake. Sarai is kind of like the forbidden fruit because she's beautiful. And then Pharaoh's like the humans in the garden. He's seeing what's good and he's taking for himself. But then if you guys know, you guys catch that? Okay. If you guys notice, Pharaoh asks the same thing that God asks the human in the garden after they fail. He says, "What is this you have done?" And so Pharaoh is acting sort of like the Adam and Eve figures and the God figure. And then Abram's the snake in the entire time. But remember, Abram and his family, they're called to be the new humanity. And so they're like the very first thing we see with this person who's supposed to be a blessing to the nations, he's acting like a snake to the nations. And it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck? How is this going to go? Okay. Sorry, I would love to stay that. We're gonna keep going. Okay, so they leave. Does everybody get that though? Did I go too fast? Okay. So they leave Egypt, and as they leave, man, Abram's loaded. He's got sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. All this stuff, he's loaded with like ill-gotten gain. He didn't get this from being honest. He got this from deceiving the nations. And so he's leaving the land of Egypt. He's loaded, but it's not really the right way you were supposed to be blessed. And so they go up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, back to the Negev. And so they kind of go back up to the land of Canaan. So Abram was super rich. Lot was also super rich. They both had these massive flocks, and their shepherds, there was a lot of tension between them. And so they were saying, like, man, we can't exist in the same spot. We can't exist in the same place. Okay, sorry, let me go back. So back to our Genesis beat. Remember, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just want to make sure we're kind of getting the where we are in the beat here. 8, 9. Okay, so we have like our new creation moment when they go to the land of Canaan. So that's sort of like 1 and 2. We have them going down to Egypt and acting like the snake, deceiving the nations. That's like chapter 3. You guys hearing what I'm saying? Okay. And so we should be expecting, remember chapters 4 and 5 are all about Cain and Abel, these two brothers that have a conflict. And there's this jealousy, and they end up splitting. One dies, but they end up splitting away from each other in the end. Okay, so we should be sort of expecting that as we read this story about Lot and Abram. Okay, so Abram was rich in livestock and silver and gold. He journeyed to the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been in the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. So it's like we're restarted to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, he also had flocks and herds and tents. So the land couldn't support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they couldn't dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Okay, so there's this relational strife between two men who are related. So let's see how it's going to go. The first time didn't go so well. One ended up getting murdered. Let's see if that happens the second time. Then Abram said to Lot, "You know what? Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen. For we're kinsmen. Is the whole land not before you? Now, separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, man, I'll go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, I'll go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. You know what? This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And so Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed, which direction? East. Thus, they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and great sinners against the Lord. See if that comes up later again. Spoiler alert, it will. So we have the Genesis 4 and 5 beat, where it's these two brothers. I mean, it's an uncle and his nephew, but they're brothers in the grand scheme of things. And there's this strife between them. But instead of murdering one, what the chosen one does is he looks at the non-chosen, he looks at Lot and says, man, you have your pick. I've got what I need. Whatever you take, whatever you don't take, I'll take. Whatever you take, I won't take. It's fine. Let there be no strife between us. But what ends up happening is the two brothers do separate. And so it's like we've done chapters 4 and 5 again. So then they go back up to Canaan and Abram and Lot separate. Yeah. Okay, so remember, and Genesis 4 and 5, what happened when Cain killed his brother Abel, he was exiled further east. So to go east is not to go to a good spot, a good place. And so Lot's going further east, which means he's going further away from like the good spot, and we're going to see if that comes up eventually. So Lot goes east, just like Cain. And he goes to a city, just like Cain. All right. And the Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring can also be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Okay, so because we've gone through the story beats of 4 and 5, we should be seeing the flood rising. We're getting closer and closer to the flood beat. Okay, so which makes sense, because when we hear when God says, go, Abram, walk the length and the breadth of the land. This is the same words that God uses when he describes to Noah to build the ark. So he says, whatever, this will be its height, this will be its length, this will be its width or its breadth. And now he's saying to Abram, do the same thing, walk the length and the breadth of the land. And so it's almost as if it's not going to be a massive boat this time that's going to survive through the flood. It's like this land, the land that Abram is in. It acts as this ark, as this boat. And we had a lengthy discussion about what the ark symbolized. Do you guys remember what it was? All right, the temple. So the ark was like the temple. And so the temples are where heaven and earth are totally overlapped and totally one. That's what the garden represents. That's what Genesis 1 presents as the entire cosmic structure. It's what it should be. Genesis 2 begins, it should be all of it, but it's just starting in this little spot. It's like this little garden area. And so the ark is like the temple, which is the overlap of heaven and earth. And so now we have this land, which is acting as the ark. And so the land, in a cosmic sense, is supposed to be where heaven and earth are unified and one. And so it's like the land that Abram is in, it's like the new garden. You guys hearing that? That's why the land of promise is so important in the stories of Exodus, is because when they go back, it's like they're going back to the garden. They're going back to the garden. So that's what these people are thinking of. The authors are thinking of the land as the new garden. It's going to be the spot where heaven and earth are totally unified and totally one. Okay, so what Abram is in, Abram is like in this ark, cosmic ark land, where he's going to be rescued from the waters of the flood that we're going to see in Genesis 14. Now, it's weird because Genesis 14, it's like a record scratch. It just says, in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. These kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemaber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela. That is Zoar. That's where Lot is. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim. That is the Salt Sea, or the Dead Sea. So 12 years these 5 kings had served the 4, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, that guy, Kedorlaomer, and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim and Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim and Ham, the Emim and Sheva Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness. You guys know where all those places are, right? Okay, yeah. They turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. Okay, so all this it's kings against kings. And so it's these mighty kings who are all kings of like the major empires that we're going to meet later. And so it's like the king of Babylon, the king of Persia, the king of the nations, Goyim. Babylon, Persia, Assyria, and the nations. And so it's all these mighty kings, these mighty empires who have this coalition. It's the 4 of them versus 5 kings that used to serve them. The 5 are like sick of it, so they start to rebel. But those 4 kings are super mighty because they defeat the Rephaim, the Zuzim, it's also came the Zanzumim, and the Emim. Now, all of those people groups are linked later on in the story to the Nephilim. Okay? So the Rephaim, the Emim, the Zanzumim, they are all giant clans. Okay? That's why when they go into the land, like Joshua, when they go in there, they're supposed to take out those people because remember, the whole point of the flood was to sort of solve the issue of the giants. And now the giants are here. They're showing up again. But what's intense is that the giants themselves, the Nephilim, are these warrior giants. They're like the baddest of the bad. But then this coalition of 4 kings defeats them. And so this coalition of 4 kings is like even worse than the Nephilim. Okay? And the Nephilim is attached to which story again? You guys remember? The Nephilim, Genesis 6, 1 through 4. God looks down, the end of all flesh has come up before me. 120 years, countdown starts till the flood. So the Nephilim are associated with the flood beat of the story. And so here we see them again, okay? We see the Rephaim, the Zanzumim, the Emim. It's basically the Nephilim again, and this coalition of 4 kings has taken them down, and so they're even worse, they're even mightier, they're even more of a problem than the Nephilim were in Genesis 6, okay? You guys got that? Okay. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, they went out and they joined battle in the valley of Siddim. Okay, they fought against them, and they get destroyed. They hightail and they run. Some of them fall into tar pits. But what really happens is that coalition of 4 kings, because they took over Sodom, which is where Lot was, they take Lot with them and all of the food. They take food with them as they capture and go. Now, a remnant, one who had escaped, came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. These were allies of Abram. And when Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born of his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. And he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions and the women and the people. Okay, so we have this coalition of 4 kings, okay, who are even mightier than the Nephilim, because they defeated the Nephilim. And then we have Abram, this little dude, with 318 men. He destroys them, okay? So who's really coming out on top in this story? Abram. Okay, we'll get there. Yeah. So we have, if we had a little lesser than, greater than thing, we have the Nephilim are less than the 4 kings, who are shown to be less than Abram and 318 men. Okay, so Abram is coming out on top. He's like the top dog in this story. He rescues Lot. He takes him with him. And because the flood, remember the flood was supposed to sweep in and basically take care of the Nephilim, Abram and his 318 men, they act like that narrative flood, where they come in, they sweep, they chase them away, they scatter them to bits, they kill them, and it's like they have sort of completed the flood portion of the story here. Okay, and then what's really cool is after his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Sheva, that is the king's valley. But Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed him being Abram, and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Because who's really on top? Exactly. And Abram gave him, that is Melchizedek, a tenth of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I lift my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. I'll take nothing but what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre take their share. Okay, so we've gone through the flood beat, and if you guys remember, when Noah gets off the boat, he does something that's completely unasked for, it's unprecedented. He offers a sacrifice, a total sacrifice of surrender, an olah offering, a total burnt offering, as a cosmic, God, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, as a cosmic surrender. And now we see Abram doing the exact same thing. Remember, all these possessions, all the stuff that he had, it wasn't from anything good. Like, it was ill-gotten gain. And so he has this sort of thing with possessions. And so what we see now is this dude, Melchizedek, who is a royal priest, which is an image of God. It's depicted in Genesis 1 and 2. This is like the first human we meet that we should be like, whoa, this dude's like legit. He's a royal priest of God Most High. That's awesome. Who's this guy? Then he's never talked about again. He gives him a tenth of everything. So it's this sort of surrender beat where Abram realizes, you know what? This actually doesn't come from me. I'm not my own protection. I'm going to surrender this thing to this dude who's like a priest. So we see Abram, we've kind of completed the whole story. We have 1 and 2, this sort of restart where they go to land of Canaan, the Adam and Eve figures. We have the failure in Egypt. We have the splitting of the brothers. And then we have this sort of flood thing that ends with Abram offering a sacrifice. Do you guys see all that? Okay, did I go way too fast? I'm sure I went faster than I would like to, but we've got a lot to cover. So we've sort of completed the one thing here. We've completed the first block, 12 through 14. We've seen Abram go through all the beats of the story thus far, where we have a creation moment. We end in this sort of decreative, recreative act, the decreation of those 4 kings, and then like the recreation of Abram is sort of like this, he's sort of changed. He's like this new man now where he has a looser hand on his possessions, where he realizes, you know what, I can actually give up. I don't have to hoard and take for myself. All right, so what I want you guys to keep in mind is that number 3. Yeah. Oh.
Are you done?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have the big board, so. Okay. Everybody good? Okay.
You want me to get a damp paper towel?
No, it's okay. It is like the story. Yeah, exactly. And that 318, I want you guys to keep that number in mind because it's kind of a weird number. It's oddly specific. Why couldn't they have just said about 300 men? They say 318 instead, and that's important. Okay, so at the end of chapter 14, we've seen Abram the snake, but we've seen Abram sort of become this sort of cosmic restart to now where he's kind of back at the beginning of the story. He's like the new Noah. He's like a successful Noah who's like a new Adam. So we're sort of starting the story back again. You guys see that? Okay, so now in 15 through 17, we should expect repetition, but variation, where it's not going to be the exact same things that happen, but it's going to be the exact same kinds of things that happen. All right, 15 through 17. And I'm going to do a better job. I'm going to split this up. Thanks, man. It's been a while. I'm a little rusty. Teaching. So bear with me, guys. Okay, so we have 15, 16, and 17. Now this is another beat to the Genesis 1 through 9 thing, so we should see, let's anticipate as things happen in the story what's going to happen next. Okay, so chapter 15. After all these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. I am your great reward. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless. Remember, the whole point is a great nation and the land. He says, I'm going to be your great reward, but he says, where is this child you promised? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. Okay, quick thing. Eliezer. Eliezer means God is my help. Now, in Hebrew, there's this thing called gematria. The Hebrew language does not have numbers. It's the same symbols for their letters and for their numbers. So the numerical value of Eliezer's name, which means God is my help. Anybody want to guess what the numerical value of Eliezer's name? 318, exactly. So 318. So what it's saying is, how the heck did Abram and this band of 318 men, how did they defeat the baddest of the bad kings in the world at that time? Because God is my help. Okay, so really, again, God's the one who's coming out on top. All right, and Abram said, behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven, look toward the skies, and number the stars if you're able to count them. Then he said, so shall your offspring be. And you know what? Abram believed God, and God counted it to him as righteousness, as right relationship. That is a proper thing to do to God, to just straight up trust. That is the preferred, that's the, not even the preferred, that is the correct way to be in relation with God. And so 15 opens up with this story of trust. And it's trust for offspring. But remember, God made two promises to Abram, mighty nation and land. Okay? So Abram trusts him for the offspring. And then he says this, and Lord said to him, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, he being Abraham, O Lord God, how am I supposed to know that I shall possess it? Okay, remember, the story, or the promise of land is no more or no less miraculous than the story, or than the promise of seed to a 65-year-old woman and a 75-year-old man. Okay, that's no more like believable. But if he trusts God for one, I'm not sure why he doesn't trust in the same way for the land. So we have this story of these two promises and two ways that Abraham evaluates them. The first one he trusts for, and that's the preferred. That's righteousness. That's like the ideal way to deal with God. But then the second time we have this covenant ceremony. And so what a covenant is a formalization of a relationship that sort of should exist by faith. And so instead of just straight up trust, where it's just like this sort of like non-material thing, it's just like, I'm going to trust you. What a covenant does is it takes that non-material relationship and it formalizes it into something. And so we get this story of God tells Abram, hey, get all these animals and just split them right in half. And so he splits them in half and they form this sort of aisle. And the point of the split up animals is that, Dad, if I was going to make a covenant with you, I would go sacrifice animals, and then we would both walk through together, and it would be, if either of us breaks the covenant, so shall our fate be. And so if I break the covenant, I'm gonna die. That's the point. That's the severity and the seriousness of the covenant. That's what it should be understood as. But what's interesting is that Abram cuts these animals in half, but then when the sun was going down, a deep sleep, a tardema, the same thing that God put Adam in the garden when he has this visionary experience of him taking from his side and building the woman. He goes into a deep sleep. And behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. And then Yahweh said to Abram, know for certain, okay, that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs and will be servants there. And they will be afflicted for 400 years. It's not a great start to the story. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve. And afterward they will come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall come back here in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. That's a little hint, a little narrative point forward to what the Exodus story is all about. Now when the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. Who was supposed to walk between the pieces in a covenant ceremony? The covenant partners. It should have been Abram and God. But who's passed out on the floor right now, on the ground? Abram. But who made him pass out? God. What's happening here? What's going on? Now on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring, I will give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river the river Euphrates. So from Egypt to Babylon, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. And so this land, Abram, you're going to have it. You and your offspring, they will have it. But what's interesting in this covenant ceremony is Abram's not even in it. What passes through the aisle is a pillar of smoke and a pillar of fire. And it's as if God is enacting his own covenant ceremony, walking through the aisle with himself. And so what he's doing is God is binding himself to Abraham's family as his own covenant partner. You guys see that? So what that means is God is signing up right now. He's signing up for the success, and he's signing up to experience the consequences of the failure of the covenant. And so right now we should see, pointing forward, guys, the story of Jesus is all about Jesus taking on the centuries of covenant unfaithfulness of his people, taking it upon the cross, experiencing all the consequences in himself. And so what Jesus is doing is Jesus is like fulfilling this part of the story. God is signing himself up to suffer because he knows his people will be unfaithful. But he's also signing up with himself because he knows that only he can be the one who's totally faithful. And so Jesus is both of those things in one. He's God coming to fulfill his end of the bargain, and God coming to suffer for the consequences of his people's unfaithfulness. Pretty awesome, pretty cool. Sweet, amazing stuff. So we have this beautiful picture of covenant in chapter 15. I mean, it's kind of gruesome with animals that are in half. But, oh my gosh. Guys, that's an animal, I promise. Half a bird on each side. Pillar of smoke, pillar of fire. Abram's passed out. He's like, what the heck's going on here? Okay, so we have God signing himself up for this covenant, the success of the covenant. And guys, that's amazing, okay? That's incredible, okay? So it's really weird. I mean, it's not weird. This is what people do. This right here, this is a person who's in right relationship with God. And so this is like a new human. We're kind of going through like the Genesis 1 and 2 beat here, okay? New human, trusting God, in relationship with him, righteousness, all that stuff. So we should expect 3 to come up, a failure narrative to come up, and really like a double failure to come up next. So now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. Remember that, she was barren. But she did have a female Egyptian servant. Remember, the Egyptian servant who they got from Abram's deception to Pharaoh. Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, says Sarai. So you know what? Just take my servant, so I can just be built up by her. And you know what? Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, so he's 85 at this point, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, his servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. The mistress, it's the feminine form of Gibborim, Gibborim is what was describing those warrior giants. And so Sarai is like depicted as this warrior giantess who's oppressing this Egyptian slave. And Hagar's name is just Hagar. It just means the immigrant. She's not even given a name. So it's God's chosen one oppressing the immigrant. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. So may the Lord judge between you and me. This isn't my fault. But Abram said to Sarai, you know what? Behold, your servant is in your hands. Do what is good in your eyes. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her. She oppressed her, and she fled from her. Okay, so right now, we have this man and a woman. They're scheming together. Remember, Abram just had this amazing visionary experience where God literally promised himself, in himself, that he was going to fulfill the promises to him for offspring and for land. And then as soon as Sarai comes up to Abram and she's like, man, I can't get pregnant. Just have sex with my slave. He's like, you know what? That's a great idea. That sounds awesome. That sounds amazing. And so that word of, so Sarai took her and gave her to her husband. Do you guys know what language that's from?
It's like the
It's the exact same wording. She took the fruit and gave it to her husband. And so now Hagar is depicted as the forbidden fruit. And so Sarai is now like the deceiver. And Abram's like he's not an innocent bystander, but he's acting like the humans in the story. Because what does he get out of it? He just gets to have sex. So he's like, sure. And then after that, we have this oppression. And Sarai's like, look, she is now, in an honor and shame culture, which is what this is going to be, the woman who could conceive. It's like Hagar bumped up in rank because Sarai can't have a baby. And now Hagar, who was originally a slave, is now like above Sarai because she can have the baby. And so Sarai's looking almost like in contempt at Sarai. And Sarai's like, I'm not having any of that. And so Sarai deals harshly with her. But Abram, again, he's like, you know what? Sarai, just do whatever sounds good to you. Whatever's good in your eyes, just do it. Just do it. So he's not sticking up for anyone in the story. He's not even sticking up for his new wife, who really he shouldn't have. Remember, marriage is for one man, one woman. But now he has two wives, and he's not even sticking up for either of them. So this is a pattern for Abram's life. So Hagar, she flees, and she flees in the wilderness. And then the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. So she's like halfway to Egypt. She's trying to go home. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from? Where are you going? She says, I'm fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel says, return and submit to her. And then the angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Yishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who had spoke to her. Who spoke to her? The angel of the Lord, right? And then she says the Lord spoke to her. So we get this little blending, this merging. Who is the angel of the Lord? Just keep that in your mind. Ponder. You are a God of seeing. For she said, truly here I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore the well was called Be'er Lachai Roi, and it lies between Kadesh and Bered. Now Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Yishmael. Now Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Yishmael to Abram. Okay, so we just covered 11 years. Okay, when God calls Abram forth, he's 75. And now we have this son who's born 11 years later, okay? So we just covered a decade of history. Okay, so 16 is all about a replay of the tree moment and also of like the brothers moment. So we have Hagar, we have Abram, Sarai, and Hagar. Okay, Sarai gives Hagar to Abram. And then from them comes Ishmael. And so we have like a splitting, not a splitting of brothers this time, not yet, but we have two rival wives now are splitting because of strife. And so they're like the narrative equivalents of Cain and Abel, where they have a splitting of the wives of these two sisters now because there's strife. And we have this sort of flood beat because like Sarai is depicted as a female Gibborim, a female warrioress, a female giantess. She's not actually a giant, but her actions are like the same thing. And so we have Hagar. She's fleeing. She's trying her hardest to go home. She's about to die. The Lord comes to her, the angel of the Lord, and says, look, I'm going to bless you because this dude, Ishmael, is Abram's son. I promised to bless Abram and all those associated with him. So Ishmael's going to get in on the blessing. He's not going to be the chosen one because remember, the chosen one's going to come from Sarai's womb, the one through whom God's going to bring the Messiah. Remember, chosen doesn't mean chosen for salvation. It just means this is the line that the Messiah is going to come from. And so that's going to come from Sarai because the whole point of the family of Israel is because they're supposed to look back and say, we wouldn't even exist had it not been for God's divine power to open up the womb of a 75-year-old barren woman, 90 at the time. And so that's supposed to be miraculous. And they can't look back at it and say, you know, we made ourselves great, just like what Abram says to the king of Sodom. The people can't look back and say, we're responsible for our own greatness. They have to look back and say, man, we exist purely from God's miraculous power. Okay, so we have a splitting of the sisters. They go back, they're back together. It's this sort of like weird, disjointed, broken family. But because we've sort of gone through kind of like the 4 through, or really like 3 through 6-ish beat, because of that female warrioress, giantess language, what should we expect to happen next in the 3rd chapter? We've had a beautiful creation. We've had this strife rise up. And then Genesis 6 is when the waters of the flood rise, and there's a decreation, recreation moment. Okay? So as we go into chapter 17, we should anticipate some sort of decreation, recreation event. Just like in the flood, it was a decreation, recreation. Does that make sense? Am I doing an adequate job of describing that, explaining that? Okay. If I'm not, please slow me down. I want to make sure we all get this. Good? Okay. All right, so 17, we should anticipate some sort of flood thing happening. All right, so 17. 17 is all about everybody's favorite thing in the world, circumcision. Now, when Abram was 99 years old, okay, 99, okay? So it's been 24 years. It's been how many years since Ishmael was born? 13. So between 1616 and 17:1, a 13-year gap. That's sort of frustrating, but it's okay. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me for goodness sake and be blameless. Because like that I may make my covenant between me and you may multiply greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, which means exalted father, Avram. Your name shall be Avraham, for I have made you a father of a hamon of nations, multitude. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring, singular, after you, the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be to them as God. And God said to Avraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both he who was born in your house and he who was bought with your money shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be with you in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Okay, so we have Abram and Sarah. They really screwed up, okay? They sexually abused their female slave out of their own power, their own definition of good. They thought it was a good idea to make a family on their own terms. So they took the forbidden fruit, and God's got to deal with it. He's got to deal with it. And so there's this sort of decreation that happens. It's like he decreates Abraham, but then recreates Avraham. Okay? So no longer shall your name be Abraham. Your name's going to be Abraham, because I'm going to make you a father of a hamon. So it's like God takes hamon, which means multitude, and he like attaches it to Abraham's name, Avraham. As for you, you shall keep my covenant, and the covenant is circumcision. And so circumcision is all about cutting off something. And it's like a severe, it becomes later on, what circumcision becomes later on in the story is a way to mark the covenant family of Israel. But right now, in the origins of the story, it happens when God's coming in and he's saying, dude, this is what you just did. So the part of your body that you abused this woman with, you have to chop a part of it off. Okay? So it's a severe mercy. It's a decreation. He's still gonna use Abraham, but he doesn't allow Abraham to go completely unscathed from this. And so he has this sort of judgment on him. And it's the same language, because what the flood does is it cuts off all life. And so now what Abraham and his family are going to do, they have to cut off their foreskins. And so in the flood beat of the story, circumcision acts as like the flood waters, as a severe mercy of a cutting off, but also of a marking of God's promise to use this family throughout the generations. And so that's what Paul later on in the New Testament, he's like, guys, why do you even want to do this? Because the origins of our having to do this is not a pretty story. This isn't like a yippee, we get to circumcise ourselves. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a judgment. This is a severe mercy. It's a decreation, recreation act. Okay, so flood equals circumcision. I'm not going to draw that. Yeah, okay. And anybody who doesn't get circumcised, they're going to be cut off from the people. That's going to come up again in the story of Exodus. We'll get there. And God said to Abram, as for Sarai, your wife, same thing. You shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. So she gets that same H sort of treatment. So she gets decreated, recreated. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Then Abram fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Yitzhak. So laughter is sachak, and Yitzhak means laughter. So Isaac's name is based on what Abram does. He laughs in incredulity to God's promise. And so what God says is, you know what, every time you see your son, you're going to be reminded of the fact that you didn't believe me. So you're going to name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I told you, behold, I blessed him, and I'll make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He's going to get on the blessing. He's going to have 12 princes. But you know what? Isaac's the one I'm going to work through. So then we get this whole thing of Abraham circumcises himself and all the families in his household. And so we have the flood, and then we also have the decreation moment and then the recreation of this promise, the promise for Isaac. Isaac, who means laughter. This is going to be the promised son. This is going to be the first fruits of the promise that God made Abraham in the beginning to be a mighty nation, to make his name great. And so Yitzhak means laughter, to remind him of what happened here. Okay, so we have really 6 through 9. Okay, so once again, we have gone through the 1 through 9 cycle again. We've been through a creation, a recreation moment with this covenant ceremony. And then we end with a recreative moment of the name changing, of the circumcision thing, this thing that's going to be cut off, but it's also a symbol of God's promise moving forward. And same thing. And the same sort of decreation, recreation thing happens with Hagar also, because she gets sort of decreated by their actions. She flees. And then God basically recreates her by supplying water in the wilderness, by saying, hey, I see you. I always hear the cries of the oppressed. So I see you. And we're going to see the story of Hagar and Sarah sort of pick up again later on, but we're not quite there yet. All right, everybody good with this? You got a picture? Yeah. Okay. All right, so when we turn the page to chapter 18, we should expect a sort of Genesis 1, Genesis 2 story beat of a restored human who's in right relationship with God. Okay, you guys picking up on that yet? A little easier to see the second time. Hopefully it's even easier to see the third time. Okay, so 18 and 19. Are their own block. And this one I think it's the easiest to hear the flood part of the story when we get there. This is the most overt sort of language connection. But chapter 18, and the Lord appeared to him, that's Abraham, by the oaks of Mamre. Okay, so Abraham is seated by these beautiful oak trees, and he's at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. So he's sitting by the door of his tent. It's this beautiful sanctuary. He's by these trees. It's the heat of the day, which should remind us of when God came into the garden at the wind of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet him and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring you a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, do as you have said. And I want you guys to pay attention to this, okay? And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. And so Sarah gets told to make bread. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good. The Hebrew is tov and rach. Okay, does that sound like anything? The tree of the knowledge of good and bad. Do you guys remember what the Hebrew is? Tov and ra. Okay, so tender and good is rach and tov. So it's tov and rach. So we should be hearing, oh, okay, this sounds like the garden. And gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk of the calf that he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. Okay, so let's see what food was brought. We have a calf. So we have meat and then curds and milk. Okay, so he took curds and milk and the calf he had prepared and set it before them. What's missing from the meal? Bread. Who was supposed to make the bread? Sarah. Okay, so let's see. So Sarah wants no part of this. She's not making the bread. Okay. Then they said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, she's in the tent. The Lord said, you know what? I'll surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old. Okay, if you guys didn't know this yet, they're old. They're advanced in years. And the way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have this Eden? The Lord said to Abraham, it's often translated, shall I have this pleasure, this delight? It's the word Eden. So after I'm old and worn out, after I'm basically dead inside, is God going to be able to bring up life from something that's dead and lifeless? And we as the readers, we've already experienced Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, so we're thinking, yeah. But what Sarah does is she laughs to herself. And remember, laughter is a sign of mistrust. That's why Isaac's going to be named Laughter as a reminder of the fact that you guys didn't trust me. In the last chapter, Abraham laughed when God told him, and now Sarah's laughing to herself. The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I shall return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, the laughter, saying, I didn't laugh, for she was afraid. And God said, no, you did. You did. All right, so that's sort of the end of the first block of the story. So we have Abraham, he's sitting at this tent, at these oak trees. It's a beautiful thing. And at this tent, he's communing with God. Does that sound like anything later on in the story? So it's like the tent is like this precursor of the tabernacle. It's this tent of meeting. And so the tabernacle is sort of calling this back. It's like, this is a good thing. This is a proper relationship with God. To be at a tent, to be able to commune together, to even eat together. They shared a meal, which is wonderful. But they shared a meal that was missing a key ingredient, and the missing ingredient was bread. And so if we're thinking about God and people, by Sarah not bringing the bread, it's like she doesn't even want to commune with God or even be in relationship with him. She's like not participating in the meal, which is why she's sort of depicted as laughing too. It's like she's mistrusting at every point. Now, Abraham trusts God completely. He's like rushing as fast as he can to try to get everything ready. He wants to be in communion with him. He's beautiful. And so Abraham is like this redeemed Adam figure, but Sarah is like this Eve figure who's doing the same thing. She's doubting God. She's taking it upon herself, her like own definition of good, to doubt God, to doubt his power and his ability. And so she doesn't bring the bread. So we have Abraham, he's sitting here, and then we have 3 men. And one of them is Yahweh. So God's coming to commune with Abe. And it really is a beautiful scene. It's amazing. So it's like this redeemed Genesis 1, Genesis 2 thing. But then we have the failure beat where we have Sarah. But this is not Abraham's failure. It's like Sarah's failure. She's refusing to trust God. What he says is true, or his definition of good. She laughs because of it in disbelief. And God's like, I heard you, but it's just like the humans in the garden. She tries to blame shift, saying, I didn't do it. And he's like, you did. I heard you laugh. I heard you laugh. Okay, so we know that in about a year's time, so they're 99 right now. In about 1 year's time, Sarah's going to conceive and give birth to a son, and the son's name is Isaac. And so we're sort of left here. We're left here with Abraham sort of being in like a good spot. Abraham's like a redeemed Adam figure. He's rocking it. And that's important for the next chapters, because the rest of the book, so like chapter 19 is really focused on Lot. And so it's like Abraham sort of like remains here. We deal with Lot. And then in chapters 20 through 22, we come back and deal with Abraham. Okay, but right now, Abraham, he's in that Genesis 1, Genesis 2 slot. He's acting right. It's good. It's cool. Okay, so then the men turned from there and went towards Sodom. But Abraham, sorry, I skipped. The men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to sort of set them on their way. The Lord said out loud, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? You know, after all, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. You know what? Because I've chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of Yahweh, to do righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. So up to this point, all these covenantal ceremonies, we've seen God, like the first one in the first covenant ceremony with the animals, it was God walking through the aisle with himself. It was like Abram at the time, didn't really even have any part to play. And then in chapter 17, we see something get added into the covenant, and that's circumcision. And then in chapter 18, we see this, yet again, the sort of requirement that's placed on Abraham and his family to keep the way of Yahweh. And so the covenant is going to be contingent upon whether or not God's covenant people keep the way of Yahweh. It's gonna have success because God promised himself. He entered into the covenant. But at the same time, it requires cooperation from his people. And so the biblical authors, they're not trying to answer the question of human free will and God's divine sovereignty. They just present the story to you, and they're just like, deal with it. We're moving on. Okay. Then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether or not they have done according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I'll know. So God is going to Sodom and Gomorrah. There's this outcry. There's this cry of blood that's coming up to God. And he's saying, man, this outcry is great. I'm a good and righteous judge. I'm going to go down and evaluate the situation. If the outcry is adequate, I will act accordingly. But if the outcry is unfounded, again, I'll act accordingly. So God is depicted as this good and righteous judge. He knows what he's doing. But he's having this whole conversation like out loud. Like it's like, God, like if I was God, I'm talking out loud and Abraham's right here. And so it's this sort of like, hey, Abraham, are you listening to what I'm saying? Are you going to enter into the conversation or not? So he's like inviting him in without like really inviting him in. He wants to see what Abraham's going to do. And so the men turned from there and went towards Sodom. The other two men, they went towards Sodom. But Abraham still stood there before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, wait. Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And the Lord said, if I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I'll spare the whole place for their sake. Abraham answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, who I am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, you know what? I'm not going to destroy it if they're 45. And so Abram's like, 40? God's like, sure. Abram's like, 30? And God's like, that's fine. And then Abraham's like, 20? And he's like, you know what? For the sake of 20, I won't destroy it. Then he said, oh, Lord, don't be angry. And I'll speak again just this once. Suppose only 10 are found there. And God answered, for the sake of 10, I'll not destroy it. And the Lord went his way, and he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Okay, so we have this human, this human in the story. He's in right relationship with God right now, and he's entering into God's deliberation process, and he's talking with him, and he's saying God, this doesn't seem like the way of Yahweh. The way of Yahweh is to judge correctly and adequately, which we already know God is. He's a righteous and active, a righteous judge. He says, I'm going to deal according with what the outcry actually is. But Abraham seems to not get that part. He assumes that part of the conversations didn't take place, because he's like, God, you're not going to do that. That's not who you are. What if there's 50? And God's like, yeah, 50, I'll spare it. What if there's 40? Yeah, 40. 30? Yeah, I'll spare it for 30. 20? Yeah, I'll spare it for 20. 10? Yeah, I'll spare it for 10. But notice who ends the conversation. Who says, let me just speak one more time? It's Abraham who ends the conversation. What if it had continued on? What if Abraham had said, what about for the sake of one will you spare the city? I mean, based on what's been said so far, I'm sure God would be like, yeah, for one I'll spare it. What if there are none in the city? What would God do then? And we don't know, because Abraham ended the conversation. But what we're going to see is there actually is no one righteous in the city. There's no one. There's no one. But God still acts according. We'll get there. Okay, so right now we take a little break. We have this negotiation, which really is not a negotiation, because if it were a negotiation, there'd be this sort of back and forth, what about 85? No, 90. What about 87? 88. There's not. It's just a straight up, what about 50? Yeah. 40. Yeah. 30. Yeah. 20. Yeah. 10. Yeah. There's not really a negotiation happening. But what we're looking for is 10 righteous ones. Will God spare the city for the sake of 10 righteous? Oh, yikes. Good thing this is all audio and not visual. Okay, righteous. 10 righteous ones in the city. So that's what we're looking for, 10 righteous ones. So now we go back to the city. We have these two angels. They come to Sodom in the evening. Now Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom, just like Abraham was sitting at the door of his tent. Now when Lot saw them, he rose up to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth, just like Abraham did, and said, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Same thing that Abraham offered. Then you may rise up early and go your way. They said, no, we'll spend the night in the town square. But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. So the very thing that was missing from the feast and the other one is present in this one. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, so we may know them, so we may have sex with them. Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, what a great dad. I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, stand back. This fellow came to sojourn. He has become the judge of us. Now we'll deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot, and drew near to break the door down. But the men, the angels, reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, that they wore themselves out groping for the door. Okay, so the word for ark, the ark, is hateva. Okay, the word for the house is habayit. So ark and house use the same letters, they're just sort of switched around a little bit. So in this story, every time we read house, we should be thinking ark. Okay? So Lot, it's these 2 angels that are with him in this divine refuge that has a door. Remember that whole emphasis of make sure that the ark has a door. Okay? And so there's a huge emphasis of going inside the door, closing the door behind him. He gets pulled back in through the door, all this stuff. And when Lot gets pulled back in through the door, it's the same thing that Noah does when he grabs the bird and he takes it back in to him. And so this whole story is riddled with ark language. And so we should understand that this is the floodwaters are rising, and there's something that's going to happen to this city. Because remember, the outcry, the blood that was crying up to God in Genesis 6, the end of all flesh was coming up before him. It's the same thing that's happening here. The outcry of violence in Sodom and Gomorrah, it's coming up to them. Often the story is used to to describe or to sort of analyze what the true sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is. But what it seems like later on in the prophets is just this overall oppressive, violent attitude that's leading to all this sort of wickedness. That's sort of the stress, really mistreatment of the poor, all that stuff, and it's manifesting in them wanting to gang rape these two men who have come into the city. But there's this divine refuge of the ark that they're in now, and so Lot and his family, they're sort of like being depicted as Noah and his family, but we're going to see who the true Noah figure is later on. So remember the flood story started with the sons of God coming down, having sex with human women. So it was this this breaking of the barrier of heavens coming down to earth to sort of unite it. And now we have this sort of same thing, but it's sort of reversed. It's human men wanting to have sex with these divine angels. So it's this whole perversion, all that stuff. So the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here?" The angel said to Lot, "Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you can in the city, bring them out to the place. For we're going to destroy it. For the outcry against his people has become great against the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." And so he goes to his sons-in-law, and he asks them, "Hey guys, come with me." And what they do is they laugh at him. Remember, laughter is a sign of incredulity. They don't believe him. So they don't believe him, and then they just hightail and go out. So the angels tell him to leave. Lot's like, "I can't make it to the mountains. Can I please just go to this one little city?" They're like, "Fine, go for it." They leave. Lot's wife, famously, she turns back, and what does she become? Pillar of salt. It's like whoever wants to associate themselves with Sodom and Gomorrah is they're gonna experience the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah. And the spot where Sodom and Gomorrah is now the site of the Dead Sea. That's why it's so salty. Something happened there to make that area incredibly salty, and it was mostly probably a meteor shower, which is exactly what's described here. So they hightail it. They go. His sons and his daughters, they don't actually end up going to that city. They go to the mountains instead. And what happens to Sodom is God rains fire, sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities, all in the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. And so God brings this. Remember, he said he was never going to flood the whole world with water again. But here we see God flooding the city with fire. So it rains fire and sulfur, and it destroys all the life, both the human life and the livestock and the plants. And so it's just like the flood, what the flood did there. So Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley, and he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. Now, if you guys remember in the flood story, that hinge after the flood waters, as in Genesis 8, it says, "And God remembered Noah and his family." And so Noah, who's the only one who's called righteous and blameless in that story, it's like his righteousness and blameless can sort of represent that of his family. And if you guys notice, who's God remembering in this story? Is Abraham even in the city? No. So what God is doing is he's choosing to look at Lot and his family as like the family of Noah. The real Noah figure isn't even in the house at all. The real righteous one isn't even in the city. And so that begs the question, if there were none righteous in the city, but there's one righteous outside the city, would God have spared the city? Who knows? Because we never got there. Abraham stopped at 10. And so Lot and his family, his two daughters, they're rescued out, they're brought out. And then we get one of the most confusing and another disgusting story in the Bible. But it's just like the end of the flood story when Ham goes into the tent. He sees the nakedness of his father. It's really the nakedness of his mother. He has sex with his mom. She conceives and gives birth to Canaan. When Noah wakes up and realizes what's happened, he says, "Cursed be Canaan," all that stuff. Do you guys remember that story? Okay. So we get something very similar here. We have Lot. He's going with his daughters to the mountains. And they're in there. The whole city is destroyed. And they're like, you know what? To preserve seed, to preserve offspring, here's a good idea. Let's get our dad drunk, and then let's have sex with him and conceive through him. And so both daughters do that. And so this story ends in just the same weird way. I'm not going to draw that, guys, don't worry. I'm going to draw Sodom and Gomorrah. With fire raining down. So again, this is like the flood part of the story, and it ends the same way the original flood did, with this weird illicit sex between family members to make this offspring. And so we have the Canaanites who came from Ham and his mom, but then here between Lot and his daughters, we have Moab, from whom the Moabites come, and then we have Ben-Ami, which means like son of my relative, and that's where the Ammonites come from. And so these three people groups, the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, they are not good guys later on in the story of Israel. And so again, they're supposed to just be depicted as, you guys think you have a great origin story, but you're actually rooted and you began in incest, this weird, awful, disgusting thing that happened. Lot and his daughters. Moab. Okay, so that is the end of 19. All right, so if you guys notice, remember though that, and we'll resume next time. We'll do the next part next time. That Abraham is depicted as he's like the Genesis 1-2 dude. He's like the new Adam. But the rest of the story follows the failure of Lot. It's like Lot's flood, okay? And so we have this sort of thing that's hanging. It's like Lot has been kind of dealt with. But then Abram's left here. He's like in a good Genesis 1, Genesis 2 state, but there's still chapters to go through. And we're going to see chapters 20 through 22. It's like Abraham now going through the parts that we missed. It's like his own failure stories, decreation, recreation moments. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're Abraham's sort of left hanging here. I think we probably should, we'll split it next time. We'll resume because it's already up there. But I want to make sure that we're all on the same page because that was a lot of information. Does everything make sense? Does anything want to be, do you guys need anything restated or anything like that? You guys know where we are, sort of understand where we are, all the beats and all that stuff is going. Okay, cool. I just want to do a sort of short preview of the next couple chapters. So in the next chapters, the next 3, we're going to see Abraham repeat what he did to Pharaoh, so a new king. We're going to resume the Hagar and Sarah story with Isaac and Ishmael now. And then we're going to have the famous Genesis 22, which is the binding of Isaac, which is like Abraham's final decreation, recreation moment where he sort of finally gets it through his head about what God wants to do. But we will resume that next time. But again, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer. All right, sweet. Sweet, guys. Thank you. All right, guys, that's it for this week. I just want to thank you for listening in, and I just want to say a blessing over you. So may God bless you as you go to wherever you're going next, home, to work, whatever. I just pray that you would feel and experience God's presence. All right, thank you guys so much.